Seven mind movements. The Apostle Paul's greatest challenge was to keep the believer moving into the fullness of Christ. The average believer is tempted to revert back to his old way of thinking when struggles comes instead of focusing on the continual process of learning Christ. After a believer is saved, the whole process of life is working the new Christ knowledge into every new situation of life. Paul gives us strategic help in this area by the things he have to move around in his own life. First, Paul moved from just serving God to knowing God. There is a crucial difference between these two truths. Today, with most believers under some aspect of the law, they have an urgency to do something themselves for the Lord because this makes them feel better about themselves. They must learn that doing is not a substitute for the knowledge that the Holy Spirit can bring to the situation at hand, whatever it is. Paul moved from circumcision to uncircumcision. This was one of the most difficult things Paul had to do. The law had taught them being circumcised touched the very character and identity of the Jewish people. Today, a believer will have to suffer the loss of whatever things is the heartbeat of his former relationship with God and move on into the fullness of Christ. Third, Paul moved from the part to the whole of Christian service and worship. He explains this in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Having just part of anything in Christianity is not the same as coming to the full stature which the God birthing makes possible. It is God's plan that every child he births will be perfect. Fourth, Paul moved away from religion on two occasions. First, when he was saved to Damascus, he moved away from Judaism. The after he had been saved for the time he moved out of Pentecostalism. Both of these moves were necessary for him to give full allegiance to the Christ who had been birthed in him. Fifth, Paul moved from preaching sermons most of the time to ministering to believers about the relationship they have with the Christ in them. Paul, with being the greatest psychologist that ever lived, his education for this came directly from Christ, who taught him about the tripartite human. The final gospel is based on this teaching from Christ. It is the basis for the final gospel. 6. Paul moved from the outer things of Christ to the inner Christ. The kingdom message centered on the outer things Christ could do, but the grace message centered on the Christ who lives in the believer. Israel and many religionists today have had to have the outer things that Christ did to prove to themselves and others that God was real. Truly birthed children never have to prove that their parents are real. This was the most important thing that happened to Paul outside of the birthing. His love for Christ and his understanding of the cross are the power that help him overcome the deep root of the law. To God be the glory. God bless you.